Great. Hello. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us at the end of the day. I think after the beautiful conversations we've had today about Lahore's layered histories, the Pakistani iconic food culture, and here in the global diaspora, what that food means, conversations about art in public space, it's actually perfect to end the day with transcendence, as Rachel Cooper beautifully described, because music in all of those spaces and places really transcends and culminates the emotions, the feelings, the nostalgia, the connections everywhere. And of course, we have with us our esteemed Ustads, Ustaad Rauf Saami and Urooj Saami. You'll be hearing from, of course, Ustaad Naseeruddin Saami and the rest of the family this evening. You have on stage the only, alongside their father, living experts and practitioners of the 49 microtones in the world today, truly living legends and living preservers of art. Alhamdulillah. So welcome. I'm also thrilled to be joined by two people I admire as professionals and human beings. I have Zebunnisa Bangash, needs no introduction. Her music obviously has been the soundtrack to so many of our lives, and a singer, songwriter from Pakistan, the pride of Pakistan, really. And here we're gonna be talking about her music and also what Khayal and learning from Ustaad Saami and family has meant to her. And finally, to really the capstone of this all is Nusrat Durrani. We're so honored to have you on this panel. Nusrat also needs no introduction. Of course, he is an innovative media executive, the founder of MTV World, a photographer, beautiful photographer, filmmaker, humanitarian, and is really known for identifying trends before they become popular. And so we're really gonna be enriched by Nusrat's conversation. So why am I here? Why is a law professor, a mother of two who lives in New York, a girl from Philadelphia, at the Lahore Literary Panel, talking to you about Khayal and Qawwal? Well, I think that says everything you need to know about the music and art form, which is that this is something that draws people from all around the world and all practices in, because there's something so unique about it. There's something so healing about it. When I went on a journey to find a vocal teacher, because I felt like I was always drawn to classical South Asian music from New York, I was like, let me just try this. Let me start taking lessons on Zoom, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to Ustaad Rauf Saami. I never imagined what I was signing up for. And what I got was not just musical training, but really culture. I got a practice. I got a way of life. This was about how you know yourself, how you found your inner voice. It's the culture of listening. It's the culture of performing. It's the culture of sacred spaces. It's the culture of who a teacher is and who a student is. This is adab. This is tehzeeb. This is our heritage. And I was drawn in and was very happy to then support Zebunnisa Bangash's mission of bringing Khayal from Lahore onto the global stage with her teachers, the Ustads on stage today. So that's what this has meant to me, and we're gonna talk further about what we've been doing right here in Bed-Stuy, wrapping up a Khayal residency program just a few months ago. But I'm gonna turn it over to the Ustads to get us started. Why do you do what you do? What is it, that brings beauty to this tradition in your eyes? And we're gonna try to keep this mostly in English, but there will be some translation as well and interpretation.
Assalamu alaikum. Adab. राऊफ भाई ने ये सवाल मेरी तरफ कर दिया है. ये ज़्यादा उसका अच्छा जवाब दे सकते हैं, लेकिन बहरहाल बेसिकली हम जिस चीज़ को मौसीकी समझते हैं वो दरअसल अखलाकियात है, यानी कैरेक्टर बिल्डिंग, कि हम अपने ज़ाहिर को, अपने बातिन को किस तरीक़े से संवारें मौसीकी के ज़रिए.
So what we consider to be music is actually an exercise in character building for us. That how we can really how we can really make our inner and our outer worlds better through our character.
सब कॉन्टिनेंट में जब ख्याल और कव्वाली ईजाद हुई तो इसका कॉन्सेप्ट दरअसल 1400 साल पुराना था। उस कॉन्सेप्ट को सब कॉन्टिनेंट में मौसीकी के ज़रिए पेश किया गया कि हम अपनी अखलाकियात को किस तरीके से संवारें।
In the subcontinent, when the inventions of Qawwali and Khayal came into being, the concept for this was actually laid back 1400 years ago. That main idea or concept was then developed, that how do we, using those particular values, create a practice which helps us in our character building, keeping those values in mind through music.
एक तरीक़ा ईजाद किया गया जिसको हम ख्याल कहते हैं कि आवाज़ों के साथ अपनी स्पिरिचुअलिटी को या अपने कैरेक्टर को पेश करना। दूसरा कव्वाली के अल्फाज के ज़रिए अपनी फ़िक्र को, अपनी इक़दार को, अपनी सक़ाफ़त को किस तरीक़े से पेश किया जाए।
So a method was created through Khayal, where you used voice to really become, to express and connect with your spirituality and your inner self, and through Qawwali to really express your perspective, your own character, and also, and again, your own expression.
ख्याल, हेलो, ख्याल और कव्वाली, इन दोनों के मौजिद हज़रत अमीर खुसरो रहमतुल्लाह अलैह, और उन्होंने यह इल्म अपने एक शागिर्द जो उनके वाहिद शागिर्द हैं सामद बिन इब्राहीम को अता किया, और सामद बिन इब्राहीम के साथ मिलके ख्याल और कव्वाली को बनाया।
Khayal is the invention of Hazrat Amir Khusro, and he taught it to his only student, Samad bin Ibrahim. And in collaboration with Samad bin Ibrahim, he created both both Khayal and Qawwali.
तो इसमें इस चीज़ के देखिए, हज़रत अमीर खुसरो एक सूफ़ी बुज़ुर्ग हैं, तो उनका जो इसमें मतमय नज़र था कि हम आपस में मुख्तलिफ़ अक़वाम मिलकर किस तरीक़े से एक दूसरे को समझें आवाज़ के ज़रिए, अल्फाज के ज़रिए, और अपनी अफ़कार को एक दूसरे तक पहुँचाएँ।
So Hazrat Amir Khusro was linked to Sufism, and his perspective was that how do we use words and voice and bring different perspective, different people, different cultures to come and really express one particular perspective or spirituality.
हम जिस ख़ानदान से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं, हम ख्याल या कव्वाली उस शय को समझते हैं जो हमारी रूहानी, हमारी जिस्मानी, हमारी ज़हनी और हमारी नफसानी इस्लाह कर सके।
We come from a family where we believe, where for us anything that is khayal and qawwali must include the one thing that the practice must be in some ways helping to develop our spiritual, our mental, and our expressive growth.
Thank you, Urooj. So I'm going to turn it over. Zeb, you've been learning, of course, from the family, from Ustaad Saami himself, from Ustaad Rauf Saami for like over 12 years now. Can you talk a little bit about, like you're hearing from us, what this practice has meant to us, like me, a law professor in New York, but you as someone who went on to have a very different music career, like you're not singing Khayal on stage, though I will mention that Zeb just did the last few weeks have her first international, and I think first any type of performance of Khayal on stage with Ustaad Saami just a few weeks ago, which were beautiful. Yes. Can you kind of speak to what this practice has meant to you, how it influences the music that you're producing, that you're writing, and what's motivating you to work so hard to bring this here to the United States and globally?
So when I first got introduced to Khayal through Ustaad Saami, it's quite a magical story, which I'll tell some other time. But I was at a really low point in my, a very high point in my career, and as is usually the case with, creative industries, a very low point in my personal space and my own self. And I met this teacher, and I went to him. I couldn't really articulate my desires because even though I had what you call talent, and I knew as a child that I had a good voice, and then I got the opportunity to be on Coke Studio and have albums and work with the best people and all that. But something in me was really wanting to connect with my own traditional music, and I could see that the kind of vocal strength that you needed to even render pop songs well, you couldn't just get by listening to somebody. It was a practice that needed a lot of rigor. And somehow for me, Pathan pop star, English medium, I just could not understand how I would be able to really get into that world. Then there's also this idea of gatekeeping, because a lot of people say that a lot of ustads, they teach their own, but they don't teach anyone outside their own family. So for me, it was a very disturbing thing. But when I met John, he asked me to just. I had all these anxieties, and he spoke to me in a very, very sweet way. And he said, look, we'll do what you need to do, and I promise you that I will try my best, and I'm confident that with God's help, it'll happen. But I need you to stop worrying, and I need you to stop asking me questions. So for me, that was very strange, because, that's what I went to Mount Holyoke for, to ask the right questions. And so then he was like, no questions. And after that, so for 2 years, I said not a word in front of him. And he just kept teaching me without me realizing that he was teaching me. And I really, at that point, I thought it was weird. I mean, honestly, I thought it was strange. I used to get very restless in the middle, but I would hold myself because this was something that I really wanted. But ultimately, in a few years, I realized that without my even realizing it, my range had grown, my voice had grown. It had, I had different things in my instrument that I didn't realize even existed that suddenly started coming up. And of course, I was using them in my recordings. I was using them in my songwriting. But what really changed was actually not even the craft. What changed was me as a person. And that wasn't an immediate realization. That happened maybe, 3.5 years in, is that, when somebody wouldn't give me a job, I didn't just run back to my room and cry and cry and cry. I wasn't getting weirded out by negative comments on social media in the same way. I wasn't, because, along with the pressures of many other things, I think with success comes this pressure of constantly being successful, constantly being appreciated, validated. All of that kind of receded. And I found more and more solace in the practice itself. And that is when I realized, and that's when I made the gustakhi, if you know that word, of asking him that why do I feel so different? And I wasn't scolded for that question. And he said, that is the purpose of this music. This music is not here to entertain you. This music is to really, he used the words, aapko sawarne ke liye hai, which means to really just like bring you in touch, make you the most beautiful version of yourself. And then I started speaking to some of his students who sang very differently from me, came from very different backgrounds. And while musically we were so different, we all experienced the exact same thing in our interiors, you know? So that's when I realized that this was not just a musical form that needed to be cool, but this was actually a helpful tool that you know, is a very big thing of our society, of our culture, of our history, that somehow our own young people do not have, young and old, do not have access to, so.
So bringing it, you know, Nusrat recently, after attending one of the Saami brothers' Qawwali mehfils, you kind of commented from your angle on the spiritual highs and lows of that night and the emotions that it brought out, and talked about their absolute mastery over microtones, classical technique, and kind of opined that why are perhaps the best qawwals in the world, classical singers from Pakistan, unsigned, maybe even neglected by mainstream media. And can you kind of tell us more about, what are your thoughts about that? Why do you think that is? And what does it say about them that they are thriving, surviving, and spreading this message, new students every day in places like Bed-Stuy, despite this, quote, like perhaps neglect? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to give you a personal anecdote. You know, I first properly heard Ustaad Saami in 2020, which is obviously, it was a very difficult year for most of us, and particularly for me because I'd lost my mother. We were going through a pandemic. You know, there was Black Lives Matter happening in Brooklyn and in the US, and it was a terrible year for me. And in 2019, Ustaad Saami's first record, I believe, God Is Not a Terrorist, had come out, and I read a review of it on The Guardian, and I got it. And I can tell you, without any exaggeration, I listen to a lot of music. I think that album single-handedly helped me through this really difficult time. And I was so fascinated by this man and his music that I couldn't get enough of it. And in fact, I reached out to Zeb because she's my source for what is beautiful and good music. And I got really into, you know, who he is, what he represents. My father was a very big fan of Khayal and of Qawwali, so I have some kind of experience in that. And fast forward all these years, in November, Zeb out of the blue calls me and says, hey, do you want to come and listen to Ustaad Saami? And I thought she was joking, as she always does. You know, she dangles these incentives and never delivers. But I said, you've got to be joking. Is he here? She said, yes, he's here. And then, of course, that's when I came to your house and I met the Saami brothers and I met Ustaad Saami. And I think it was, without exaggeration, one of the most enchanting afternoons of my entire life. Because not only did I get to meet the man, but also I got to photograph him and speak with him. And without hyperbole, I want to say that I felt that I was speaking to my own father who passed away 25 years ago. Because the nuance, the delicacy, the depth and wisdom of what he was saying, it was transformative. It wasn't just about music, it was about a culture that is vanishing. So that's just the background. You know, I think that it's a sacrilege that this music is not more widely known, and it's not more widely written about, and it's not more widely heard. As someone who's been in the media industry and in the music industry for a very long time, I've played a small role in trying to bring music from the rest of the world to the West, because traditionally what has happened, not traditionally, but post-World War II, I think there has been this notion of cultural imperialism where the West, including the US, and with the help of MTV, we've just been pushing our own music onto the rest of the world as a one-way sort of, one-way stream of music, and we haven't been bringing back enough from the rest of the world. Now that is changing because of social media, obviously, but not this kind of music. This is music in its most purest, most pristine, most beautiful form. My theory is, it's not a theory, it's just like observation, is I think that when music from the East in particular becomes sort of better known or more heard or listened to in the West, there are several reasons for it, but I think there are 2 or 3 things I can talk about are, first of all, what used to be royal patronage, under which a lot of this kind of music in the, historically in the 1800s, et cetera, and the 1700s, that's royal patronage is why this music flourished. Now, state patronage is an important piece. And I think that plays a very important role. How much investment there is in the artists. A great example in a different genre of music is K-pop. K-pop just didn't magically happen. South Korea treated that form of music as its #1 cultural export, invested in the artists, promoted the artists, helped them reach bigger audiences. Question is there state support for this? The other thing I think is important is storytelling and media attention to any form of classical music. And you'll notice that Western classical music doesn't have the problem that we have. You will have no dearth of stories about Pavarotti or, Maria Callas or Cecilia Bartoli or Philippe Glass, as they're great artists too, but there's no dearth of storytelling and media attention around them. And I think that it's incredibly important that we tell the story of this music, not just to ourselves in South Asia and India and Pakistan, but to the rest of the world. And I think it's not just us. I think if there are journalists in this room, there are people in this room from the media, they need to tell the story. Anytime that you've had stories written, for example, Arif Lohar performed on this very stage, Abida Parveen, thanks to the Asia Society, has performed on this very stage. They've received great press attention, and that I think is partly the reason that they were relatively successful in the West. And actually, I want to point out and acknowledge the work that Asia Society has done in this realm, because this is rare. What we're going to experience tonight is rare, and I think there are very few organizations that are actually doing this work, and I think it's invaluable. The second thing is, the other thing is collaboration and innovation, and how the artists themselves are going to be able to navigate this very challenging question of how to bridge the gap between their indigenous audiences, wherever they are from, and the rest of the world. And this, I think, is incredibly important. I'll give you many examples of this. Ravi Shankar, great example. The Beatles discovered Ravi Shankar, learned from him. George Harrison in particular brought him to the West, performed with him on stage. And I think that helped Ravi Shankar. Of course, he was also virtuoso and a master at his craft, but it helped him reach audiences he normally wouldn't have. There are many examples. Zakir Hussain in the same, performed with Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead, et cetera, et cetera. But closer to this panel and in the genre of Qawwali, Ustaad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, great example. Virtuoso, arguably one of the greatest Qawwali singers ever to live, well known in the East, but it was his albums with Michael Brook that really helped him gain a new audience, and his collaboration with Martin Scorsese on The Last Temptation of Christ, for example, his work with Oliver Stone on Natural Born Killers, his collaboration with Eddie Vedder and Jeff Buckley, and his friendship with these artists helped him reach wider audiences. Now, I'm not for even one moment suggesting, because I think it's absurd to suggest that if an artist of the stature of the Saami brothers or Ustaad Saami himself have to do any of this, to reach bigger audiences, but it's an avenue. And it's a question. I mean, I think this raises many questions. I think that it really truly is a great loss to music lovers everywhere that this music is not heard more widely. And I think there are three questions to be asked of different constituencies in this. First is the question of the storytellers and media people in the room is like, why is it that we are not focused on telling this incredible story of Ustaad Naseeruddin Saami, who for 50 years learned the craft, or 60 years learned the craft, and never made an album. It was never heard. And his devotion to the purity of the man, it's like just incredible, that story, and it hasn't been told properly, I believe. So what is media doing about this? The second is the question to the industry itself, the record industry. And the question is, are we forever going to be enslaved to commercial trends and slave to the algorithm that is going to keep suggesting the same bullshit over and over again? Or are we also going to focus on what I think is a sacred duty of the record industry, on artists like these gentlemen on stage, and really bring them to the world to preserve, And then there's a question to the audience itself. I mean, are we going to be slaves to Spotify? Are we going to keep listening to what is suggested to us by, these companies that make so much money and give very little of it to artists? So I think that we as audiences also have a responsibility. We really need to find the treasures amongst us, and we need to promote them. So, I mean, I know that's a long-winded response, but, that's what I think.
No, I think these are like the hard conversations we need to have, and I think it's like almost like a chicken and egg situation in a sense, because it's like we need to be hearing these stories and telling these stories, but then we have these artists. Part of what we admire most about them, one of the most endearing qualities, is their lack of commercialism. The fact that they are so focused on their art and their teaching and the fostering of these communities and the akhlaq and the culture that we're talking about, that they are not going to be the ones to want to tell their stories. And like a small example of this is I'm constantly teasing them about their Instagram page. I'm like, can we please get someone to make this look more professional? And that's like the last thing on their mind. But then hearing from so many media executives that do they have a great Instagram page? That's like how I would get to know the artist. So I wonder if both of you and Zeb, you can kind of jump in too, having been working on Khayal and spreading Khayal globally for a long time. What is your thought between balancing, the non-commercial aspects of what we love about this with the reality that we do want to get the story out because we want it to be preserved? I think there's an urgency actually to preserving this as an art form that comes from Amir Khusro and Mia Samad bin Ibrahim. It's very important for that to be melded into history, right now in this moment. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then I'll turn it back to those thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think responding to what the wonderful points that Nusrat made was so smart, because actually I think if there were more stories written by them, they wouldn't have to commercialize. It actually works the other way. If their story was told if their craft was seen good for what it is, if their story was seen and presented and told and disseminated in an authentic way, there wouldn't be as much pressure to commercialize. It's the opposite, because and also it also, I mean, I know it's an overly used kind of concept, but I mean, I can't. Sorry, I'm going to use a C word, like colonized minds, Like it is like that when you're in Pakistan or you're speaking to people back home or in the region, they just cannot feel, if they're thinking good business, they're thinking good money, hip, exciting, they'll be very, very excited to bring a Malian chanter from Timbuktu, but if you say, let's also bring Khayal in there, they'd be like, no, people are not interested. And, for 10 years, I tried so hard that somehow the funding and the support from this should come from back home. It should from the places where this art was originated. I reached out to journalists, I reached out to record labels, I reached out to so many people, to big organizations, universities. Everybody had the same, people, this is not something our youth cares about. But that's not the point. The point is just because our youth doesn't care about it, if they don't care about eating healthy, that doesn't mean we always feed them, junk food. So there's that, and then there's also, that in the only thing that we found, the big breakthrough happened in the West. And I think that's an interesting thing, because I think the idea of diversity of cultures and of finding value now is places like New York, places like the Adjacent Society, and places like the Center for Cultural Vibrancy, who actually funded this entire Khayal project after 10 years of us shopping it around. Like, that has been a real exciting development, and also seeing how successful that Khayal residency has been. We have so many in the audience today, and that's right. So people here, young people here, people from all over the world are interested in this, but I think sometimes it's tough for South Asians to acknowledge and accept that.
Can I just add a small point to this? I think that it's absurd and ridiculous to accept an artist of Ustaad Naseeruddin Saami's caliber to be a virtuoso, to be so devoted to his craft, but also to be, a social media expert, and to make himself palatable to the West somehow through collaboration and whatever else. And I think we need to take that weight off the artist, But on the flip side, I think that there's nothing wrong with innovating, I think that you can stay true to your craft, to your traditional craft, and still innovate, whether it's in the quest of reaching wider audiences, or just to extend your range and to extend your own, ecosystem. I think there's nothing wrong with that either.
Oh, and so we have, the 45 minutes really flew by, and I'm looking at Rachel, who's like, but I wanted to kind of, with all of this, end it back where we started, of course, with our ustads who are on stage. Despite all of these challenges, in spite all of these challenges, you've had a widely successful, incredible, almost 1 year, more than 1 year of touring in the United States. Like Zeb just said, they're wrong that the youth don't like this. You have sold out shows in Brooklyn, a few times a month. The halls are filling to listen to Qawwal. There's people lining up to learn from the ustads and develop their own relationship with this music and this family. What are your kind of closing thoughts? There's people here who are going to be listening to this music for the first time tonight. Any closing thoughts kind of as you wrap up this tour of yours in the United States, of what you've taken away from this experience here?
देखें, हमारा अमेरिका का जो तजुर्बा है, हम उसको समझते हैं कि वो कामयाब तरीन है। अभी एक गुफ्तगू हो रही थी कि कमर्शलिज्म के बारे में। सही है कि इंसान एक हद तक कोशिश करता है कि वो कुछ अर्न करे, कुछ कमाए, लेकिन क्या उस कमाने के चक्कर में हम अपनी रूह बेच दें? एक हद तक इंसान पैसा कमाए, लेकिन जो चीज़ बनी ही एक स्पिरिचुअलिटी और कैरेक्टर बिल्डिंग के लिए है, हम अगर उसको इस तरीके से ज़ाया कर दें तो फिर एक जनरेशन टू जनरेशन जो चीज़ हम में ट्रांसफ़र हो रही है और हम तक आकर हमसे कोई ऐसी गलती हो जाए जिससे वो बनी बनाई चीज़ बिगड़ जाए, तो फिर ये हमारे लिए बहुत एक सख्त लफ्ज़ है कि शर्म का मकाम है।
मेरी बारी आखिर में आएगी। प्लीज।
like a quick translation. I can't translate it as well as it was spoken, but it's obvious that we all have to earn a living and we all have to be in the market, but we cannot sell our souls, because this music is actually made for spiritual ascension, for building your character, for having a better sense of self. So we are all open for commercialization, for innovation, for all of the other things, but it has to be in the limit where we don't feel that the generations that we represent before us and the values that we represent before us kind of were ruined because of our choices. So we have to be very careful. That's it.
सबकी तरह हम भी कमाना चाहते हैं, हम भी चाहते हैं हमारा नाम हो, हम भी चाहते हैं हमें इज्जत मिले, लेकिन हम ये भी चाहते हैं कि उस इज्जत, उस नाम और उस कमाने के पीछे में कहीं हमारा काम ना निकल जाए हमारे हाथ से। तो काम पे हमारे पास कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ नहीं है। नसीरुद्दीन सामी साहब ने कई हुक्म हैं हम चारों भाइयों के लिए। दुनिया वापस अपने मदार के गिर्द आती है, एक वक्त आता है कि लौटती है। उस वक्त का इंतज़ार करो, क्योंकि मैंने भी 50 साल उस वक्त का इंतज़ार किया है तो मेरे पास आया है। अब तुम्हारी बारी है, लेकिन तुम्हें बहुत अच्छा वक्त, अच्छे लोग, अच्छे समझदार लोग मिलें तो ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लगेगा, लेकिन हिम्मत मत हारो। और कमर्शलिज्म के पीछे उरूज भाई ने भी बोला कि सौदा मत करो, तो कोशिश करेंगे कि सौदा ना हो, जो जैसा है ओरिजिनलिटी है वैसे ही पेश की जाए और वैसे ही रखी जाए।
Kind of forgot.
I can get us started. You might have to do a part of it.
I got a little emotional.
No, he was saying that, like everybody else, obviously, we want to earn, we want fame, we want our name to be out there. But in pursuing that, we can't forget the fidelity and loyalty, commitment to our work at the outset. And it is really the command of our Father, the guidance of our Father, to really just wait and just stay steady on your path, because eventually the trends will pass and things will come back in your direction, as he waited for decades, for 50 years, he said specifically, for, in individuals in Pakistan and globally to understand the mastery he had over the microtones, and now he's known as, the last living legend, having passed that to his sons. So kind of to wait and be steady and maintain your path. So I know do we have some time for questions, Rachel, or no, none at all? Okay, all right, so I know you all are coming back at 8, many of you, to hear Ustaad Saami himself. And I want to say it's a really special evening this evening, because Ustaad Saami to be, the last living practitioner of the microtones. But tonight is a night where Ustaad Rauf Saami and Urooj Saami will be singing Khayal and presenting those microtones themselves on stage, starting their Qawwali performance with a separate Khayal performance, which is a very special thing for us all to hear. So we look forward to having you later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.